On the table because we're negotiating for the best deal possible, and as everybody knows, we have approved have the strike authorization vote ready, so that leverage isn't going away. Do we want to do it? No, we don't.
Now listen carefully to how the messaging changed once those concerns became public. When Breanna Stewart spoke about the situation afterward, her words sounded extremely cautious and carefully constructed. She emphasized that Terry Carmichael Jackson remains the executive director of the Women's National Basketball Players Association and expressed confidence in her leadership. At first glance, that statement appears supportive and reassuring. But when people compared that message with the tone of the earlier letter, the contrast stood out immediately. A 3-page document questioning negotiation strategy sends a very different signal than a brief public statement expressing confidence in leadership. That difference in tone led some observers to speculate that the situation had shifted quickly behind the scenes. Stewart later explained that the letter was not intended to undermine Jackson or create division within the Players Association. According to her comments, the goal was simply to raise questions and ensure that players felt informed about the negotiation process. But realistically, documents like that can have broader consequences. Submitting a formal written complaint to union leadership during active negotiations inevitably introduces tension. It can highlight disagreements within the organization and signal to outside observers, including the league itself, that there may be fractures among the players. And fractured leadership often weakens a union's bargaining power. Another detail that caught attention was how quickly the situation appeared to resolve. Within a matter of days, Stewart indicated that she and Kelsey Plum had spoken directly with Jackson and other members of the executive committee. According to her explanation, those conversations addressed the concerns raised in the letter and clarified misunderstandings. In just 72 hours, the situation seemed to move from formal written complaints to public assurances that everything was moving forward productively. For some observers, that rapid turnaround felt unusual. Major disagreements about negotiation strategy rarely disappear overnight. That's why people began speculating about what might have happened during those private conversations. Perhaps the issues truly were resolved quickly through dialogue and clarification. Or perhaps the leadership group simply decided that public disagreement during such a critical negotiation period would do more harm than good. Either way, the speed of the reversal became part of the story itself. Because when messaging shifts that quickly in high-stakes negotiations, it inevitably raises questions about what pressures might be operating behind the scenes.
Let's talk about Breanna Stewart. We got two things from her. We got her in a video that some people online have literally described as what almost comes across as a hostage video. Like, blink twice if you're in danger. Move your head back and forth like that if you need SWAT to kick down the door. It's a very strange kind of video. It comes across as kind of strange. All right. And we've got her making comments about the players union now. And her threatening a strike. And I'm like, okay.
As the story continued to unfold, reactions from fans and commentators grew increasingly intense. Some observers began describing the situation using dramatic metaphors, arguing that the pattern of events suggested something unusual about the internal dynamics of the Women's National Basketball Players Association. The criticism largely centered on how quickly public disagreements seemed to disappear once they became visible. From the outside, it began to look as though players who raised questions about union strategy were being encouraged or pressured to fall back into line with the official messaging. Whether that perception is accurate or not remains difficult to verify. But the pattern has fueled speculation. There have been other moments during the negotiations when players publicly raised questions about issues such as revenue-sharing proposals or the financial implications of potential strikes. In several of those cases, the conversation seemed to fade quickly without clear public explanations. For critics watching the process unfold, that pattern suggested a leadership structure that might be prioritizing unity over open debate. Supporters of the union leadership, however, see the situation differently. They argue that internal discussions are often best handled privately rather than in front of cameras and social media audiences. Negotiations of this scale involve complex legal and financial details, and airing disagreements publicly could weaken the players' collective position. Both perspectives have merit. Healthy unions typically encourage discussion and allow members to question leadership decisions. At the same time, negotiations often require a coordinated strategy and a consistent message when dealing with league officials. Balancing those two priorities can be extremely challenging. In this case, the perception among some observers is that dissent is being managed quickly and firmly to maintain the appearance of unity. Whether that approach strengthens or weakens the players' negotiating power remains a matter of debate. But the intensity of the reactions shows just how closely people are watching the process. Because whenever labor negotiations involve high-profile athletes, the public conversation tends to expand beyond the negotiating table itself. Every comment, every statement, and every shift in tone becomes part of a larger narrative about power, leadership, and the future of the sport.
WNBPA Vice President Breanna Stewart said Friday that the letter she and Kelsey Plum wrote to the Players Union Executive Director Terry Carmichael Jackson earlier this week was, quote, intended to get the entire executive committee back on track. You drowned everybody. And rightfully so, it sounded like, to get the best collective bargaining agreement deal possible as negotiations with the league continues. Guys, we're 3 days shy. We're less than 3 days shy of the drop dead.
As more details about the letter began to circulate, it became clear that the concerns raised by Breanna Stewart and Kelsey Plum were not minor disagreements about small procedural issues. According to reports, the document described deeper problems within the leadership structure of the Women's National Basketball Players Association during one of the most critical negotiation periods in the league's history. The letter reportedly suggested that the executive committee might not have been fully aligned on strategy. It raised questions about communication, transparency, and the overall process guiding negotiations with the Women's National Basketball Association. Those are not trivial concerns. When union leaders begin questioning whether everyone involved is operating with the same information or following the same strategy, it indicates a level of internal tension that could affect the entire negotiation process. One particularly serious issue reportedly mentioned involved the possibility that players were feeling pressured regarding how they should vote on certain proposals. If true, that would represent a significant problem. Healthy unions typically emphasize open discussion among their members. Players should feel free to debate strategies, question proposals, and express their opinions about the direction negotiations should take. But when concerns arise about pressure or lack of transparency, it suggests that the decision-making process may not be functioning as smoothly as expected. Timing makes the situation even more sensitive. Negotiations surrounding the collective bargaining agreement have a firm deadline approaching. That deadline represents the moment when both sides must either reach an agreement or face the possibility of more serious consequences, including work stoppages. At the time these concerns were reportedly raised, the deadline was only days away. That makes internal disagreements particularly risky. When unions approach negotiations with a divided leadership structure, it can weaken their position at the bargaining table. League executives often look for signs of unity among players because a fractured leadership group may struggle to maintain a consistent negotiating stance. Meanwhile, the WNBA itself has reportedly maintained a firm position on key issues like revenue sharing. League representatives have indicated that they are not prepared to make major concessions beyond their current proposals. So when Stewart and Plum raised concerns publicly through a formal letter at that exact moment, it naturally led people to wonder whether the situation behind the scenes had become more chaotic than anyone realized. Because if leadership within the Players Association is struggling to maintain alignment during the final days before a negotiation deadline, that could dramatically affect the outcome of the entire process.
Said the letter, which was obtained by ESPN, was not meant to undermine Jackson or to cause divide with the executive committee or Players Association. Quote, Terry is our executive director. We know she is leading us in the best way possible. While there might be some differences in opinion or questions that are being asked, it's all in good faith of knowing what we need to do, what's right for all players. Stewart said she and Plum, the first vice president of the union, have spoken with Jackson directly since sending the letter and have spoken with the rest of the committee. I'm starting to believe the rest of the committee, let's just keep it real, bunch of snakes. There, I said it out loud. A bunch of slithering, venomous snakes. Now, we good? Everything is good now. Nothing to see here. If you need SWAT to come get you, Breanna, do this. Just turn your head back and forth like that twice.
When you step back and examine the entire sequence of events, it becomes clear that this moment represents a critical turning point for women's professional basketball. The negotiations between the Women's National Basketball Association and the Women's National Basketball Players Association will shape the economic structure of the league for years to come. Issues like salary growth, revenue sharing, and working conditions will influence not only current players but also future generations entering the sport. That's why the internal dynamics within the Players Association have drawn so much attention. When influential athletes such as Breanna Stewart and Kelsey Plum raise concerns about negotiation strategy, people pay attention. Their voices carry weight because they represent both leadership positions and elite status within the league. At the same time, the rapid shift from internal criticism to public unity highlights the immense pressure surrounding these negotiations. Union leaders must maintain solidarity among players while also navigating complex discussions with league executives. Every public statement has the potential to influence how negotiations unfold. That's why messaging often becomes carefully managed during critical moments. For fans watching from the outside, the situation may appear confusing or even contradictory at times. One day, there are reports of internal disagreements. The next day, there are statements emphasizing unity and determination. But that tension is often part of the negotiation process itself. Behind closed doors, debates can be intense. Players may disagree about strategies, timelines, and acceptable compromises. Those disagreements are natural in any organization representing hundreds of individuals with different perspectives. The challenge lies in balancing honest discussion with the need to present a unified front when dealing with the league. Right now, that balance is being tested. With negotiation deadlines approaching and the possibility of strikes still being mentioned publicly, the stakes could hardly be higher. The decisions made in the coming days will determine whether the league and its players move forward together under a new agreement or whether the tensions that have surfaced during these negotiations lead to a much more dramatic confrontation. And until those questions are resolved, every statement, every interview, and every shift in tone will continue to be examined closely by fans, analysts, and everyone invested in the future of women's basketball.
I did a video yesterday blaming the league for their fracture. No responsibility. Let's not take any. No wonder this is a shit show. No wonder. Have you noticed that the one consistent thing in all of this has been the WNBA players got their heads in the freaking clouds. They got their heads in the clouds. They are so far disconnected with reality of their situation. I think the league's going to be forced to lock them out.
The reaction from observers following this story has been immediate and, in many cases, filled with genuine confusion. Analysts who have spent years covering labor negotiations in professional sports have openly admitted that the situation feels unusual. Because when you look at the timeline, the sudden shift in messaging creates a kind of whiplash. Just days earlier, Breanna Stewart had reportedly participated in raising concerns about the strategy of the Women's National Basketball Players Association during its negotiations with the Women's National Basketball Association. That kind of move suggested there were serious internal conversations happening among the players about how the union leadership was approaching the situation. Then, almost immediately afterward, Stewart appeared in front of reporters during a national team gathering in Miami connected to USA Basketball. And the tone was completely different. Instead of focusing on concerns or disagreements, she presented a message of unity and determination. She spoke about the players standing together and emphasized that strong actions, including the possibility of a strike, were still part of the broader strategy. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Fans on social media noticed the shift almost instantly. Online discussions began circulating clips of the interview alongside references to the earlier letter. Some people even joked about how dramatically the tone had changed, comparing the situation to someone being forced to deliver a carefully scripted message. Of course, those jokes were mostly exaggerations. But they reflected the sense of confusion many people felt when they tried to reconcile the two events. The timeline itself adds to the intrigue. Earlier in the week, Stewart and Kelsey Plum, who serve as vice president and first vice president of the Players Association, reportedly co-signed the letter addressed to executive director Terry Carmichael Jackson. According to reports, that letter was detailed and formal, outlining concerns about the way negotiations were being handled. 3 pages is not a casual message. It's not a quick email sent in frustration. It's a structured document that likely took time and discussion to prepare. It represents a deliberate effort to raise questions about leadership decisions at a moment when negotiations are approaching a critical stage. And that's exactly why the sudden public shift in tone has caught so much attention. When prominent figures in a union appear to change their messaging so quickly, observers naturally start wondering what happened behind the scenes. Did new information emerge? Were disagreements resolved through private meetings? Or was there pressure to present a more unified message once the letter became known? Right now, the public doesn't have all the answers. But the timeline itself continues to raise questions.